This is part two of Saigyo's awesome Nightfall. Here we go. The following poem, most but not all scholars agree, appears to have been composed within a couple of years of Saigyo's Shuki. It shows up after his decision to make a more clean and unambiguous break with the society and culture of the capital. He says Suki means he went into travel, isolation. I don't know. Having separated from the world, I was at Deer Bell Mountain, Tsukikayama, on the way to Ise. He says Tsukayama, shaking the bell on this mountain. Am I loosened from the world now? Question mark. Can I shake myself enough to know what lies ahead for me? Number system here. 796 or 1611. He says, this is a famous poem at the Deer Bell Mountain. He says, Deer Bell Mountain is Suzukayama. He says, shaking the bell on this mountain, am I loosened from the world now? Can I shake myself enough to know what lies ahead for me? There is an intensity in this inquiry about the need to go strongly up against all that holds one to older, well-grooved patterns of life. Okay. From the perspective of the capital, Koya was very remote, and Saigyo employed this theme of remoteness as the opening lines in a series of 10 poems. He notes that he wrote them at Koya and sent them to Jakinen, a monk living at the time in Ohara. Jakinen sent 10 of his own poems in response. Saigyo records that what he sees in this place differs greatly from what would be seen back in the city. 2 of this set are, he says, Yama Fukami, poem 1289. Deep in the mountains, sitting upright on moss used as a mat for myself, with not a care in the world, is a gibbering, chattering ape. Now he's referring to the deep in the mountains, sitting upright on moss used as a mat for himself. You'd think he was talking about himself, and then he says there's an ape. Then he says, with not a care in the world is a gibbering, chattering ape. Then he says, deep in the mountains, no song of birds close to what we knew at home. Just the spine-tingling hoots of owls in the night. What do you think of that? Deep in the mountains, no song of birds close to what we knew at home. Just the spine-tingling hoots of owls in the night. Remember, we've probably heard that before about the owls.
The spine tingling. Hoots. What's hoots?
Hoots are the noises. The hoots of an owl are hoo, hoo.
Oh, okay.
You know, hoots. It's an onomatopoeic word.
How do you spell that?
Hoots. Hoot. Hoo, hoo. Goodness. I have to give English class so you can learn English. While we study Japanese. Are we going to learn Hindi and Punjabi, and Sanskrit, and Spanish, and Greek, and while we learn English. Let's see what he says here. A more rigorous practice of Buddhist regiments for both body and mind shows up in the multiple poems he wrote about being on Mount Omini, a site that, in that period, for undergoing severe, often painful disciplines. Kubota notes that these disciplines were to emulate the sufferings of beings in the three lower realms of the six-tiered Buddhist cosmology. Hauling heavy burdens up and down such mountains gave one the experience of life as an animal. Receiving only meager provisions of food provided insight into the fate of the hungry ghosts. Being tongue-lashed with accounts of one's every fault and physically beaten with canes provided a taste of hell, life in hell. Saigyo hints at the rigors of Ominini routes in the following. At the place called Ants Crossing, here he says, Sasa Fukami, 1203. Crack of morning, climb from caves and thick bamboo grasp beyond the mist. Body now bending along stark rock forms at Ants Crossing. Most of the poems of this place, however, celebrate the results, and these are uniformly positive. Some of Saigyo's splendid poems about the moon and the increasing clarity of his own mind seem to flow directly from the austerities undertaken at this point in his life. On seeing the moon at the place called Shinsen on Mount Omini, he says, Fukaki Yamani, poem 1191, passage into dark, mountains over which the moon presides so brilliantly. Not seeing it, I'd have missed this passage into my own past. Then he says, Suki Sumiba, 1193. So brilliant a moon up there that the clouds have sunk down into the valley, urged along by winds sweeping the peaks. Here he says, I was on a pilgrimage to Mount Mitsu province in the northeast for a spiritual discipline and stopped at what had been the checkpoint at Surakawa. Now with the dilapidated roof, the building let the moon's beam shine right inside. Curiously and beautifully so, I recalled the phrase, breezes of autumn, in a poem by the monk Noan, written at this same location. It is the place replete with tokens of the past and many memories. I added my own part by writing the following poem and fastening it to a pillow on this structure. It's funny how Basho, this is like travel poetry. Here he travels and writes a poem. And here he recalls a poem by Noan and writes a poem. Whereas Basho would do the same thing. He would travel, write a little comment, and write a poem and say he was thinking of Saigyo. Right?
Did
So,
you read that? Did he say which part?
This poem says, Surakawa no, 1213. The guardhouse at famed Kira's Surakawa gate, now ruined, lets the moon filter in. Its shaft is like having another staying here. Now the moon is slipping in.
This is, which poem is that?
And then he says, I recall a phrase from the breezes of autumn in a poem by monk Noan, written at this same location. Whose poem? That's Saigyo's poem.
Oh.
Saigyo wrote this comment. He says,
He doesn't refer to the poem.
He says he went on pilgrimage to Mutsi province. He recalls the poem written by Noan and writes this poem.
I read that.
The whole thing?
The part.
The guardhouse at famed Shirakawa Gate, now ruined, lets the moon filter in. Its shaft is like having another staying here. Much current interest in this poem centers around whether or not Saigyo was aware of rumors in the capital just then that no one may have never gone on the pilgrimage north and have composed this poem with a figurative persona while he himself was abiding in the capital. Concerning another person in the past with a shaky reputation, Saigyo wrote the following poem with an extensive head note. That's a head note to the poem. Extensive head note. While in the province of Mitsu, I came across an unusual-looking grave mound. I asked whose it was and was told that it belonged to a middle captain of the palace guard. When I persisted in inquiring exactly who this person might have been, I was informed that it was Fujiwara Sanitakata. I was deeply saddened. Even before learning the details, I had sensed the pathos in the scene of forest, shriveled, pompous grass, so fragile it was almost invisible. Later, in trying to express my feelings, adequate words were almost unavailable. Kichi Mo Sanu, 872-793. One part of him escaped decay, his name. Still around here, like this field's withered grass, my view of the relic he left. Remember that thing about the grave?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this must be a different translation.
But read what he said about the moon.
Before?
Yeah, the poem,
the prior poem?
Yeah, the moon. That's okay.
The moon says the shaft lets the moon filter in. The moon was coming in because the old gate was ruined.
Yeah, after filtering.
Its shaft is like having another staying here.
What do you mean by staying?
Staying.
Oh, that would stay there.
Somebody else there. The moon.
Oh.
I don't know.
Somebody, S-T-Y. S-T-A-Y.
Stayed there. S-T-A-Y.
Okay.
Hmm.
The moon alone.
On the occasion when the remains of retired Emperor Toba were being escorted to this place of entombment, he says, different from places your Majesty visited before, tonight's sad final journey in this world takes you far beyond the world itself. Oh, presides the, right? Oh. Alright. After retired Emperor Sutoki, he was like a court poet in the beginning. Gone too soon, and not much was heard in society any longer about poetry. I wrote the following and sent it to the monk Jakinen. He writes, Koto no Hano, 1317. Grievous fate to find you've come to live at that juncture in time, when gatherings of refined poets are a custom just become extinct. The custom of refined poets gathering become extinct. Perhaps Saigyo's concern here was compounded by the fact that he only recently had been receiving increased attention for his own verse.